I think we're giving people a few minutes, and then Andy and Tela and Jane and Zach will take over.
Start at 5 after. All right, what do you think, Jane? Should we get it started?
I think, yeah, get started, and we'll have the recording too. So if anyone wants to, if they hop in later, they can watch it.
Miss out on all the great strategies. All righty, well,
5 minutes of silence to start would be great.
That's right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. We'll go ahead and get started. Before we start, just a little bit on the procedures for how we're gonna handle Q&A and all that. We do want your questions, but to make sure all of that flows nicely, we would like you to type your questions in the chat. Jane's going to be keeping an eye on that so that as those questions come along, we can address those. And feel free to either address your questions to the whole panel or to a specific person if you don't want someone to answer, or if you want a specific person to answer. So what we are doing tonight is going through some basics on how to all about points racing, and we've got some general discussion, some basics and specifics on how to win, how to lose, how to train for it, and as well some examples to talk you all through. So for our panel tonight, we've got myself as well as Tela Crane and Zach Maino, and so we should have every angle of points racing covered, from losing to winning to relegating. So to start us off, I'm going to ask Zach to just give a little walkthrough of the basics, sort of what it's all about, what a points race is for people who are newer to track racing, what the numbers mean, all of that. So take it away, Zach.
Thank you, Andy. I recognize most of the names on here. I'm Zach Maino. I'm that official guy that most of you recognize. Yeah, so a points race is essentially, as most of you know, is a scratch race with sprints. And in those sprints, you're awarded points. For most of those sprints, it's going to be awarded to 4 people at 5, 3, 2, and 1 points. And for the last sprint, it's going to be double that, which is a rule they go back and forth on every, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. I hope that doesn't change anymore. If you gain a lap on the main field, you get 20 points. If you lose a lap on the main field, you lose 20 points. At the end of the race, it's based on how many points you have determines the winner. If you're tied on points, it's broken by your placing in the final sprint. So that last sprint matters even if you aren't in contention for points. So keep that in mind. A rule that I just want to like put out there for pretty much all mass start track race rules that newer riders aren't necessarily aware of: everyone finishes on the lead lap. We account for that in our scoring. Everyone finishes on the lead lap. You do not need to do extra laps after the race is over. And let's see here. And so for our track, we often have looks like a 4x4 or a 5x4 or a 4x5 or a 5x4. And what does that mean? The first number is the total number of sprints in the event, and the second number is the distance between those sprints in lap count. So if it's a 5x5, it's 5 total sprints separated each 5, and then there'll be a sprint every 5 laps. If it's a 4x5, it means there are 4 total sprints every 5 laps. If it's a 5x4, it's 5 total sprints every 4 laps. I have that correct, Andy, correct? Because I always have to think about that.
You rattled it all off correctly. Yeah.
I have to think about that every once in a while as well. And so that's the basics of points racing, and we'll get into the nuances of the lines in a little bit.
Yeah. So just one of the things that is important to remember is, so one of the most common permutations we have is where it sprints every 5 laps. And so what that means, and we're going to talk about this as we get into the how to win or how to lose strategies. What that means is that your sprints are going to come on the bell is going to be rung every 5 + 1 laps. So when the lap board is showing 16 or 11 or 6 or 1, and that sounds really basic, but when you're really tired, it's hard to keep track of. The by 5s are easy. I would recommend that, especially if you're newer to this, that for any of those permutations that are not by 5, a 4x3 or a 7x4, where the sprints are going to come at different numbers than you're used to, writing it down beforehand is a good move to make, so that when you glance at the lap board how many laps it is before the next time the bell is going to ring. One other thing to add there is that if it's 5x5, you multiply the numbers together, and that's the total number of laps, which sounds basic, but I figured I'd mention it just for.
I try to when I'm doing starter, if it's like 5x5, it's something like 5 sprints every 5 laps. I try to say 25 lap race, sprints every 5, and that seems to be a lot easier to understand with Racer Brain. But I'm going to jump in here and answer a question that Aaron brought up in the chat, and that's how do you determine if people have lapped the field or if someone has been lapped. For example, this happens frequently in the women's field. Say we have 8 racers. There's 4-person breakaway who lap the other 4 riders. In general, the largest group on the track, the group that has the most number of riders, is considered the field. And everything is going to be dictated off of either the lead rider or the field. And so once you are able to take shelter behind the field, we will call you up a lap. And once you've been absorbed by that group, we will call you down a lap. Where this gets fun is, let's say we have those 8 women, and you have 2 groups of 4. By the book, that front group is the field. So the 4 that are off the back together, it's just off the back together. And when they get caught, those 4 would go down a lap. This gets much more complicated as groups form and disperse periodically around the track. And so we try not to call the field until we absolutely have to. So in general, like that's in general. When you have it shattered and it's just solo riders around the track, it gets really difficult. So in general, we just say down to the leader because that makes scoring a lot cleaner. But that's something we'll deal with at some other time.
I wanted to
makes
add one
sense,
more
yeah.
thing about the point sprints and figuring them out, because when it's a 5x5 or something by 5, most of us are pretty good at counting by 5s, even when you're out of oxygen, you would think. Maybe, but when it's like a by 3 or a by 4, I know for myself, like that I halfway through the race I don't know even what lap we're on anymore. So I really like Andy's suggestion, at least early on, to pay attention so that you know and start getting into the rhythm of when those points are going to be, because that will help you remember when you are that tired in the race. The lap counter has a really nice etched when the point sprints are going to be, when they're going to ring the bell. And so if you don't know, go take a look at that when the bell is up, and it tells you like which laps they're going to ring the bell, and that helps you kind of remember. And the other trick for figuring that out is you know that there's always going to be a bell on 1 to go, so you can count up from that instead of trying to count backwards. For me anyways, when I try and count backwards, I mess that all up. And so it's helpful to start, like the bell is going to ring for sure at 1 to go. And then if it's a by 3, it's going to ring at 4, 7, 10. I'm not going to keep going because I'll probably mess up, but you get the idea, right? That kind of helps you like figure it out, for me anyways.
And the one at 1 to go is the most important anyway, so.
If you ever have some free time at the track and want to volunteer, go do lap and bell. It is the easiest role in the world until it's not. It's one of those things, once you do it, you'll understand it's actually pretty hectic. So volunteer, help out.
It's a great way to learn those weird ones.
And if the bell gets missed, the sprint still happens.
Say that again, Zach. I think that's an
If
important
the
one.
bell gets missed, the sprint still happens. If you're supposed to sprint at 10 to go and they miss the bell at 11, you're still sprinting at 10 to go.
Is that different than in a scratch race? Now we're getting into the weeds. I'm going to learn something
Wow.
tonight.
If they missed the bell in the scratch race, someone really screwed up. But you only have the one bell in a scratch race. So without going too into the nitty gritty of this, that I think the rule, I have to actually go double check the rule on this. I think on a missed bell and something like that, it is, we will watch the sprint, and if we should show 0. Like the rule, like how I would operate it if I were in charge, is if the bell got missed, you're still sprinting. They missed the bell, but everyone's racing for that 0. If someone screws up, and this may have happened at, I don't know, maybe a UCI race before or national championship, where the bell gets rung again, or gets rung in, they missed it at 1 and then rung it on 0, and they go around and sprint again, you kind of have to look at both sprints and determine which one was the race. And that's what you're going to base your results off of. And no matter what, you're going to upset someone. And we just kind of acknowledge that that's going to happen.
Fair enough. All right. That's never going to happen at our track because we have great bell ringers, a long history of them. Okay. So let's get into, so that's what it is. Let's talk a little bit about, now I think looking at who's on here, and thinking about, most of you get what it's all about. Let's talk about some strategies for getting points, because you can't win the race without starting just with what are some different ways to tackle those many opportunities to accumulate sprints or accumulate points. So one of the simplest ones, and it's simple, but it does often work, I like to just call sit and sprint. And that's, you hide from the wind, wait around until it's time for a sprint, go ahead and sprint, and then get back in the field and keep hiding. It works more often than it ought to for how complicated it is. Doesn't work for everyone though, because especially if everyone's trying it, the harder it gets to have that pay off for you. Another one is to take a flyer. So instead of waiting for the bell to ring or for coming out of turn 2 after the bell is rung and going for it, go long to catch folks by surprise. Works a lot. It's hard, but it works a lot. Third strategy that is maybe even more successful and definitely harder is to counter the sprint, especially when it's a by 5. This is a long effort to counter the sprint and to hold on for the next one. But late in a race, when everybody else is tired, well, even when everybody's tired, even the person trying it, can be really effective. And it's a way to, if you can't rely on your fast twitch, if you're the kind of racer who isn't gonna be in the top 4 if you just sit and sprint, this is a one that can really pay off and get you those 5 points for first.
Andy, when would you counter the sprint?
Ooh, all
Give us
right.
your secrets.
Yeah. So you give away all your Kieran secrets. So I should give away some of my points race ones. So a lot of people counter the first sprint, and I think that's foolish because everybody's fresh after the first sprint. I mean, you might be a little bit tired. Nobody's tired enough that you're going to stay away for 5 more laps countering the first sprint. Or if you did, why didn't you just win the first one? So for me, I like to do the second or third one. It depends on how hard the first 2 sprints are. And I've got some video that we can talk about how to do it and how not to do it. But for me, the key with countering the sprint is that it's most effective when there's going to be some speed change. So what that means is if you get through the sprint and you are in that lead group, so maybe you got 4th or 5th and you're right up there, but you're all going the same speed. If you just keep going the same speed, then all those other people who are right there with you can just get on your wheel, and that's not gonna be very fun. And by the same token, if you get gapped off in the sprint and you roll through, if everyone is on your wheel, then you're not going to have a great time either. And so what sets it up to be an effective strategy is if all the folks in front have pulled up and you are able to sit not at the very front of the field that's catching on, but maybe a little ways back, and you see folks are going to be pulling up too. And if everybody starts slowing down and you drill it through, either over or under, depending on where people have gone, then you can create some separation, surprise people. Nobody's going to want to reaccelerate. So those are the conditions that make me go, this is the one to go for it. A fourth strategy, which is, I hesitate to even recommend it at our track, but because I know people don't always race at our track, taking a lap, like Zach said, is 20 points. I mean, that's worth a lot of effort. How many times did we see laps get taken in 2021? I think twice, once in the 3s and once in the 1-2s. It's not, and I think, actually, no, I think once in the women's field as well. It doesn't happen a lot. And it's usually, so I hesitate to call it a strategy because it usually relies on somebody just being strong enough to do it, and they could probably do something else. At our track.
Or the field getting lost, right? Like they don't necessarily realize that someone is that far ahead, because that does happen at our track because the track is so long that you don't constantly see that person right in front of you. So if they get just out of the way and the field is kind of messing around, then I think that's the other chance of it happening.
And I see in the chat, Chris pointed out the key factor that lets it happen, which is if there's negative racing going on. So I think in like an omnium, where maybe 1 and 2 in the omnium are looking at each other, 3 could go take a lap, and neither 1 or 2 is going to try and chase it down. So what were you going to say, Zach?
Oh, I was just going to make a joke and be like, what are you talking about? Riders take laps in Detroit all the time.
Yeah. So if any of you have gone up to Burnaby, completely different story. It's very easy to take a lap. I can also say from experience, it's very easy to lose a lap. But really at any other track that you might go to, it is something that's worth considering. And so since Tela, since you have a lot more experience than I do going to other tracks and also taking laps, what is the effort like to take, like, what is that
That's
like?
really, really kind of you to think that I have ever taken a lap in a points race. As a recovering sprinter, that would never be my strategy. But it is much more common at smaller tracks because it doesn't take as long. If a lap time in LA, maybe you're doing like a 15-second lap, that's a big difference than, you know, here going pretty fast. It's a 30-second lap in Marymore, right? So it becomes a little bit easier. I think that it really depends on the dynamics of the race if that's going to happen. You'll see it a lot at the elite level, but it's usually a couple guys going together, or girls, whatever, a couple of people going together, not necessarily like on your own all the time. And that's a good strategy too. It's a kind of like, maybe you see somebody trying to go and you're like, oh, that's a good time to go. Maybe I should go with them. You guys have a lot better chance of getting that distance on the field, whether or not you actually get the lap. But you see that be more successful more often than the solo rider. It does happen. And oftentimes it's just like the right, perfect timing. The pack sits up. You'll see it, you know, on 250 tracks, pretty common. I mean, if you look at the points race results, the points spread will be pretty high because people will have like plus 40 points. They took 2 laps or something, you know? And so it's definitely more common on those shorter tracks. But don't rule it out on our track. I think if you get a buddy and it's a longer race, that it's totally possible. And I do think the long length of the track, like I said, makes it easy sometimes because you're far out of sight, right? Like, you know, you get a half a lap on the field if they're messing around. You know, before too long, you're going to catch up to them.
Yeah, I was going back and looking through clips in preparation for this, and in the Masters points race at the GP in 2019, 2 folks, both out of towners, took a lap, and I think it was because nobody knew who they were and they didn't know any better, and they were out there a long time. It took them almost 10 full laps to get the lap.
Which is also a really good time to pick up points. And if you know that you're not a sprinter, you know, like even if you don't end up successfully getting that lap, if you're out there for half the race, you're getting all those first and second place points if you're with a buddy, you know.
Exactly.
That adds up.
Yeah. So they ended up winning with they got the lap points, and then one of them took 2 first places en route to that. And they didn't take any other points the entire race, but that was enough to win.
And that's actually a good springboard into something I was gonna say is about gaining the lap is this happens somewhat frequently where the rider thinks they've gained the lap, but we don't believe so. So as you're approaching the back of a field, riders are going to come off the field and you have to get to the field. That may require picking around some of those straggling and dropped riders. You have to get to the field before we will call you up a lap. And so where this becomes common is approaching a sprint where the leaders want to hold off taking that lap until just to get those extra points before they take their lap. And then the field pushes the pace and riders start getting shelled out the back. And so now you have this minefield of riders to pick through before you can actually get the lap. And so just heads up that also happens when trying to take the lap.
I was going to mention that too, because I wanted to kind of have you chime in on the ruling on that, Zach, because you'll see it sometimes when people are going to take a lap where they purposely don't take the lap so that they can continue picking up those points. And I know there's a certain distance, if you get too close, that the officials will say that you have to take the lap or something. Can you clarify that for us?
Yeah, I need to double check because I think they actually put a distance in because it used to be like take shelter. It might actually be like 5 meters or whatever they've added now. I'll have to double check that. But yeah, if you're just sitting out, it depends. It honestly will depend on how close you are to the sprint. Because as officials, our job out there is to make sure it's safe, but also make sure it's fair. We're caring about the sporting aspect of the race. And so we want the race to be sporting, right? And so if you're sitting off the back of that field, just waiting for the sprints, and we know you can very clearly like take the lap, and it gives other people an opportunity to actually like animate the race and make it interesting. We might be like, well, you were close enough, you're in. So it's going to be about 5 meters. And if you're within like a lap or two before a sprint and you ease up, we'll probably let you and say, yeah, that's fine. We get the strategy there. We don't want to destroy and completely ruin your race and your strategy. But if they're doing it for like 4 or 5 laps in a row and they're close enough, we might say, come on, let's make it let's make it a race. Let's make it exciting.
Cool. All right, and then one more strategy that matters enough that it's worth mentioning. It might sound a little silly, but I like call it the glorified scratch race, which is if you know that you're not the sort of racer who's got 7 good sprints in them, but you know you've got 1 good sprint in you, then hide and take advantage of those double points, because there's going to be a lot of folks that might win 1 sprint and then not have anything else. And if you can win the last one for 10 points, you can get on the podium with 10 points. That's a pretty legitimate strategy. So and everybody else is going to be tired. So if you've played your cards smart all the way through, that can pay off really well. I see, and yes. Yeah, I considered just calling it the Carlberg, but all right. So that's some ways to get points. Zach, tell us some things not to do.
Don't cause crashes. That's where I'll start. Ride safe. So what not to do? Jokingly, I put on this list: bribe the officials. Don't bribe the officials. It's not a good strategy. Though I actually think we have. A lot of people don't realize the talent of officiating we have at our track. And we have about 10 people that work most of our races, and of them, immediately 6, 7 of us work national, international races on a regular basis. So we know racing pretty well. We're happy to talk. Always come up and chat and ask questions. We're happy to answer those. So what's going to get you disqualified? What's going to get you relegated? What's going to get you warned? So we know the typical things. There's that lovely red line on the track. That's your sprinter's line, and that designates the sprinter's lane. If someone's in it, don't chop down on them. If you're in it and the sprint's engaged, you shouldn't be leaving that lane. You should not be moving up track into people. The blue band, it's painted bright blue for a reason. It makes it really, really easy for us to see if you're down there. And riding on the blue band itself is not a penalty. This is a fun one people don't necessarily realize. Being on the blue band itself is not a penalty. Taking any advantage of being on the blue band is a penalty. So if you get pushed down, that's fine. Stay safe, back out. But if you actually pass on the blue band, then yes, you will likely get relegated. Let's see here. If you are off the back and the leaders catch you, you're not allowed to help them. You can sit on, you can get pulled back to the field, but you can't actually help. They can't draft you. You cannot provide assistance to help them gain their lap. I put on this list sprinting when ineligible. So if you had a mechanical or you are in what we call no man's land, so you're off the back, but you're tagged onto the back of the leaders. If you try to sprint when you're not eligible, we'll probably we can't really relegate you. We'll probably warn you because you won't have gotten points in the first place. But we'll give you a warning for unsafe riding. And really anything that's considered unsafe, lateral movements, not looking when you're entering lanes or exiting lanes, just any erratic motion, like we'll probably give you a warning for something that we think is detrimental to the race, affected the sprint, or was just dangerous and was going to hurt somebody. And yeah, that's mostly what I have, unless Andy has any comments or prompts for me that I may have forgotten.
No, I think that's the key in all of that is the rules that we have are about keeping people safe. And that, yes, sometimes you might end up down on the blue, and I was curious, would you get relegated for passing on the blue if you were passing a lapped rider who should have been pulled, say at a national championships or something? I don't know.
So I'll say I'll say, like, I'll circling back to saying that we have very experienced officials. Generally speaking, we see all this. We are accounting for most of this most of the time. Every time, like once in a while, we get distracted. Yes, that happens. But if we see if we know it's a dropped rider and you had nowhere to go, the safe option was to go down the blue band to get around them, we're probably not going to yell at you. Or at least formally. We might come and chat with you afterwards just to discuss it, but we won't give you a warning or relegation if we know that was the safe option.
I just want to emphasize something that maybe not everybody knows, that actually going down onto the blue band can be pretty dangerous for you and people around you, especially on steeper tracks in the turns, because the transition is pretty steep. So that's just something to be aware of in the turns. Like, that's not going to help you very much. Sometimes with a lot of speed, you can actually wash out. I've seen people crash themselves and everybody above them out that way. You also run the risk at our track. There's a little bit of a seam, a lip. So I wouldn't ever say that it's like a great option to do. Usually if you're ending up on the blue band, it's kind of like an oh crap moment. And so, that's not what you're trying to do. I think sometimes people coming from the road are like, oh, this is the quickest way. It's like my spot that I can fit. And most of the time that can actually be more dangerous for you. And usually as a result of not paying attention far enough in front of you, because, yes, sometimes you have no other option. It happens, right? But a lot of times that can be avoided by paying attention in front of you, because you can almost always tell when you're about to overtake someone, especially when you're catching a lapped rider or something. They're usually going a lot slower than you, especially on our track if you're lapping them. And so it's just something I thought was kind of an important detail to throw into this conversation, that it can actually be really dangerous. And so it should be something that you try to avoid in general. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Yes. And like I said, it usually is this safety option is when it happens. But I will say, if you're the leader, if you're up front and you are in your sprint and you drop down to the blue band, just know that you are exiting the sprinter's lane. And if someone enters the sprinter's lane and you move back up, you're actually at fault. The sprinter's lane is not defined from the blue band to the red line. It's actually the black line to the red line. So if you ride down to the blue band, someone can take that lane from you. So if you come back up after going to the blue band, just be aware, you're probably the one that's going to get in trouble. And Aaron asked another, Aaron asked another good question and asked me to explain what makes someone ineligible for a sprint. So the obvious one I alluded to was if you are off the back and you're tagged onto the back of the leaders and you affect their sprint because you are not eligible, you will get in trouble. We'll probably warn you. The other one is, and I was looking this one up.
And Zach, just to expand on that, since maybe not everyone knows, maybe you already said it and I missed it, but if you're off the back and you've been caught by folks who are off the front, you don't become eligible until the field catches you.
Correct. Sorry, I should. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I leapfrogged into assuming everyone knew something.
Yeah.
Burden of knowledge, right? So let's say you go off the back. You are not eligible to sprint again until you are caught and lose your lap, or if you tag down to the leaders and get back to the field and get back to and catch back up to the lead. You will be eligible for points one way or the other. In the middle there, you are not eligible. You could be off the back, you could be in no man's land, but you are not eligible for points in that situation until you either get back to the field or lose your lap.
And
The
you're also
other
not
one-
allowed to help the other folks.
Correct.
You're allowed to
Yeah.
just suck those wheels, which is great. No obligation to work, and you're not even allowed to.
And the other one is our mechanicals. And so you have on our track, it's closest to 1,250 meters is the free lap rule. So 3 laps on our track. If you get back into the race, you have to be in that field when that bell rings to be eligible for points. If you jump into the field on their sprint lap, you are not eligible for points.
Interesting. I don't think I've seen that happen a lot.
Well, sometimes people go up track and they drop down right at the front when the sprint in the middle of the sprint lap. Yeah, don't do that. You're not eligible and you're going to likely cause a lot of problems.
So if
Right.
that happens to you, if you had a mechanical and you're riding up high, waiting to get back into the field and the bell rings, where are you supposed to come back down?
Hypothetically, you're supposed to go to the back of that group. I don't know anyone who ever has in any race I've ever watched.
That was what I was getting
And
at.
yes, I think it's actually, I think the rule is back to the position you were when you left the track. But yeah, it's supposed to be at the back of the group by all normal nomenclature in cycling. But most people just go right back to the front and kind of get absorbed and usually are back up to speed about mid-group. As long as you're not dramatically affecting everyone and not riding dangerously, we just kind of shrug it off. We might come chat with you one-on-one afterwards, just from an education standpoint. But yeah, that's usually what that looks like.
Cool. Thank you. All right. So we talked through how to get points, but getting points doesn't necessarily let you win the race because lots of people are going to get points. So I'm going to ask Tela to talk us through a little bit about, okay, more than just getting points, how do you win? How do you win a points race?
Well, you want to have the most points.
Oh,
That's how
okay.
you're gonna win.
Okay, it's easy. Never mind.
Yeah, that's all you have to do. It is really easy when you're one of the strongest people because you're consistently getting points. A lot of times you're winning sprints. If you aren't necessarily getting all the points, it becomes a lot more about keeping track of the math of it. Because not only are you paying attention to the points that you are getting, you also need to be paying attention to at least kind of the zone of people that you're competing against. You know, there's going to be kind of usually the same core group of people getting sprints. Yes, there's outliers. You have, you know, a couple of people who get big points early on in the race, but then you never really see them again the rest of the race. Or, you know, the person who's sitting in getting no points all race and just going for that final sprint. That's kind of a different thing. You're paying attention to the people who are consistently around you in those sprints, right? Or the people who, you know, maybe you get second place and they get no points on one sprint and then it's reversed the next one, and you kind of are paying attention like, oh, I'm like pretty much even with this person, so it's really important for me to know where they're at in the race. This becomes even more complicated in like an omnium when you're trying to pay attention to those points, right? But it is a math race, right? Like you can't avoid that. Especially if you're trying to decide when to use your energy for a sprint, right? And that might mean like you have to put in a little bit extra to beat that one person that you know that you're close to in a sprint. That if you weren't paying attention, you might just be like, oh, I'm fine here. I don't need to do that little bit extra, right? But at the end of the race, 1 or 2 points can make a huge difference. And so that's something really important to pay attention to, like where you're at, and then obviously where other people are points wise too.
Yeah, for me, it's especially the longer ones. It's too much to keep track of every single person's points from the very gun. And so my lazy way of doing that is I don't really, if it's a 25 or more, 5 or more sprints, for the first 2 sprints, I'm just gonna let happen what happens. I'm not keeping too close a track. And then once I get about a third or halfway in, I will consciously make the effort to listen, not to whatever chit chat or whoever's cussing me out for not taking a pull. I'll try and listen to the announcer and figure out what's the status at that point. And from then on, I also stop and think, how many sprints are left? And what does that mean for the total number of points that are left? And I start to think about it kind of how you said, Tela, of counting up from one. I think about the race from around the midpoint on of how far away am I from first in terms of points, and how many total points are up for grabs still, because that helps me figure out, do I have to win every sprint that's left in order to have a shot, or do I have to make sure that I win the final sprint in order to have a shot? That's how I approach doing the math, because as much as I'd like to keep track of everything, I can't. And so I try and narrow it down to just keeping track of enough. And that can be hard, and I definitely screw it up. But there's that cognitive load of you. It does take effort to do the math, and so that's my approach with trying to figure that out.
We're really lucky to have Corey because he does a really good job keeping us up to date on what points totals are. That's not the case at other tracks. Or they might be totally wrong, or oftentimes they're like one sprint behind still because they're not really paying attention, or they're not getting info from the officials very quickly. Our officials get that to Corey like right after the sprint, and so he's able to announce that. And so yeah, you'll often see riders like kind of looking around, and they're just trying to get a better like hear of what the announcer is saying, because then you can kind of tell like, you don't necessarily know even who got points behind you if you won the sprints. And so it's important to have like kind of ballpark idea. And I already made this joke, but I'm definitely a recovering sprinter to the max. Points races are not my favorite thing. And so a lot of the times I cannot do math when I'm in the middle of suffering that much. And so it really comes down to being aware of who's around you. You don't need to necessarily know the math and the numbers and the points, but if you're like consistently around the same people getting points, then you kind of have this like idea of who you at least need to be watching out for. And you may not end up winning the race because you didn't do the math perfectly to beat this person and have the right energy, but you at least have kind of an idea of who you should try to be beating at the very end, right?
Zach,
Yeah,
I see your comment.
that was just a string one of your comment I was discussing about. Sport happens, right? Like we let it pass most of those part, but if it's very loud and it's like in the home straight, yeah, we're gonna say on points, on point calculations. Especially on the later races when the sun goes down and lighting isn't nearly as great. We're using a phone camera to record these sprints so that we can verify the numbers. It might take us a lap or two to validate the points, because we often can't read the bib numbers, but we can see the jerseys and the bike. So we might have to wait for you to come around again and pick you out of the group so that we know exactly what number to allocate points to. So if you're getting mad at us for not getting points immediately, give us a lap or two. We have an idea of who it is. We just need to verify.
Or try and score a points race, because it's very hard. So I always think that that's something that's really important for people to try to do. And you learn a lot about the race if you're paying attention like that. I think that helped me a lot because I used to have to do that out at the track scoring races, and you really can kind of anticipate like what's happening in the sprints. And I think that really translates really well to being in the race and seeing that better too.
Yeah. So, okay. So knowing which sprints you got to win in order to win, that's a key. What about if you're up the road, say you took a flyer or you countered a sprint and you've got 2 or 3 people, how do you decide if you go all in and work really hard versus how do you make the call to try and make the break work, or to sit in and hope the other people in the break are going to do the work for you?
With all of my points race breakaway experience, I do always think that it is better to do some work in a breakaway. Keep the momentum going. If you're slowing down a breakaway, it kind of ruins it for everybody. And it also makes it harder for you. If you slow down on the front of the group and you pull up and then they reaccelerate and then you're trying to get back on, if you're the weakest person in that breakaway, that's actually harder for you than just taking a shorter pull at that same speed. People who kind of slow down, I think they think that it's easier if they're slowing down, like, oh, I'm not strong enough to like go this hard, but it actually makes your job harder. So don't be afraid to like take a few hard pedal strokes and keep the momentum of the group going, because people also in that breakaway, if you're not doing any work, they're going to leave you behind. And so your better option is to stay with the group. And so yeah, it might be hard, but keeping that momentum and staying part of it, you have a better chance of staying away. When to work, when not to work, or when to keep the breakaway going, that is a really dynamic question. I think you have to be really paying attention to what else is happening in the field. If everyone's kind of sitting up and looking around at each other behind you, then yeah, maybe it's a good time to like really put in some good digs and get that separation, because once that separation happens, a lot of times the main field is not as motivated to chase you. But if you're kind of like messing around in your breakaway, like 20 meters in front of the field, that feels like an easy catch for the field to make. And so they're more likely to just right away get you. And so that's kind of my impression watching, being in those situations. Like, you have to be paying attention to what the group is going behind you, and then also who's with you. Because if you're not strong at a breakaway and you're with two other people who are not necessarily strong at a breakaway, that's when I'd kind of be like, this is likely not going to work. But if I'm the weakest and I'm with two people that are pretty strong, then I'm like, okay, I'm actually going to go pretty hard to try and stay with this, because I have good confidence that this has potential.
Yeah. And I think someone like you who's a dangerous sprinter, putting in, even if you're not taking full lap pulls or whatever, putting in some hard work is necessary, because otherwise whoever's with you is going to go, why am I going to tow Tela around? So even if you're not doing I like what you said of, it's better to keep the speed up for, okay, on our track, you don't have to do a full half lap pull. You could keep the speed up for 2/3 of a normal pull and then pull off is better than slowing it down for a full half lap. Sounds weird to say a full half lap, but you all know what I mean. So the things that I think about with this is it depends on where you are in the race. So how close you are to that next point sprint, for me, plays a lot into whether I'm gonna put the dig in and put the effort in. If we kind of rolled off the front but it's right after a counter and I sort of do the look around and I'm like, are we really gonna stay away to the next point sprint? Or are we gonna have to murder ourselves just to get to the next one? And we're early in the race and everybody's still fresh. I kind of back off out of those. And the other one that I try and do, but that's really hard, especially when Zach was saying it's hard when it gets darker for the officials. It's harder when it gets darker for me, when I try and look back and see who's pulling on the front. And if the people that I've got in my head of they're my main threats are the ones doing the work, I'll keep working. If it's a bunch of other people and the folks that I'm worried about are getting pulled back up without having to do any work, that's not a good equation for me, because I want the people I'm worried about to have to put as much energy into it as me. So on the flip side, if I'm back in the field and there's a group up the road, there's also a decision about, like, do you work or not? Do you try and chase it down? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think this is when the math kind of comes into play, or at least being aware of who those people are up the road. Because sometimes it's people who you're like, I'm not worried about them at all. You still have to be careful depending on where you're at in the race, because if they end up being off the front for like a majority of the race, they're getting a lot of points. Sometimes that can work in your interest because they're getting the points and the person who is close to you in points is not getting any points. So even though you're also maybe not getting points, neither is that person that is, you know, that you're going head to head against, right? And so that's where it's really important to be aware and see who's in that group, see who's in the group with you, and then make a decision. And sometimes you can be patient and wait for other people to start chasing, and you can be like what Andy was just describing, like you can kind of convince other people to do that work for you. I'm totally guilty of being like, okay, up, we need to get going, let's go, right? To try and motivate other people to start that. And on the flip side, I also have started chasing and gone really hard for like a quarter of a lap, and that gets everyone motivated behind you, and then you slot back in and you get kind of a free toe up to that group. And so I think a lot of that is knowing when to use your energy, which, you know, that takes experience to figure out like how much of that you can do. But I think that it's always better to try and get some help to do that chasing, but you can't wait around for other people forever. And so if you see somebody up in that group that is, you know, starting to gain on the points that you have, you need to take that in your own hands. And whether that means you go off the front of the field and nobody goes with you to bridge that gap, or if that motivates people to start chasing, don't wait around for somebody else, right?
Yeah. If that's the case where it's the hardest one is if there's 4 people up the road, because then there's no motivation to, you're not even accelerating for the 1 point that's still on the table or something like that. It's tricky to motivate people. And sometimes I've been in the last 10 laps of a race and known that I have enough of a gap on somebody who also isn't up the road that I can't lose if the break stays away, and I'm just sitting there, and I'll be as disruptive to the break to the chase as I can, because it's like I don't need to come back and sprint again. Let's just roll this in. Doesn't happen that often, because usually at least somebody up the road is a points threat. But in like an omnium situation where people have accumulated bigger points totals, that can happen. And yeah, like you say, that's when knowing the math is really key. So when it's always better to be leading going into those situations, because then you're in control. You're not stuck being the one who's kind of forced to chase if you want a shot at winning. Being second, if you want a chance to win, you're going to have to get everybody to chase. That's harder.
I would also say something that I'm thinking about in the field, if that situation, you know, if there's a breakaway up the front and it's me and a couple of the people that are close to me in points in the field, I don't like to be too far back in the field, because I don't want to run the risk of one of those people close to me bridging up to that group and me not being a part of that, because then all of a sudden I'm screwed, right? Because my like perfect math of, oh, I don't need to get any points because this person's not getting any points either, and then all of a sudden they're up and they're probably going to win the sprint because they were motivated to get up there, right? And so I don't like to be stuck in traffic, so I'll probably ride a little bit higher on the track. I'm trying to stay close to those people that I'm worried about. And so I think there's a lot of different dynamics that you have to think about in that situation, so you don't get trapped and end up having to do way more work, or miss out on an opportunity for points. Because a lot of times those kind of breakaways end up getting caught for the final sprint, usually because of someone maybe like Andrew, who's like very motivated to get that last point sprint. And so that will give that motivation to the field. And so that's when it gets really dangerous for you if you're too far back in the group. And you can all of a sudden go from you're guaranteed first place because you did this perfect math to, oh my gosh, I'm not even on the podium anymore, right? So a lot can change.
Yeah, it's very tempting to try and play the math games and be like, you know what? I don't need to do any more work. I've got this race sewed up as long as A, B, and C happen. And if you've gotten to the point where you're leading by that point, you know, maybe just keep it going. Just keep working, keep suffering.
Billy had a really good question in the chat. That should probably be.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so let's talk teammates in track racing. You don't have any. That's pretty much what you should assume outside of team pursuits and team sprints. You may be racing for the same team, but the general principle in track racing is every person for themselves, and that you should be doing everything you can to get the best outcome for yourself. And Madison, yeah, and get the best outcome for yourself. And you should not be helping teammates like you might in road racing, where you might try to affect someone's chase. So there is a rule called collusion, and it's very, 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 very rarely called. It's very hard to prove. It's really that is it my opinion versus everyone else's opinion. So collusion is more likely to be called in all pretty much mass start races. It's not going to happen in unlikely to happen in team events. It really could happen in Kieran if you have multiple people from the same team or same country in a Kieran. We see there are some things that Australia and New Zealand do once in a while that we are right borderline, but it would just be restarting the race anyway. And so these happens more frequently in mass start races. It doesn't get called very frequently. I actually did call it at national championships last year. That was difficult. But well, I shouldn't say it wasn't difficult. It was a pretty easy call. We had two riders. We had one rider from a team way off the front, came around the field and went right up the front, and his two teammates were in the rotation in the field together, and they'd pull off together and just like that little bit slower coming around the front, slowing the field down. And honestly, if they weren't right next to each other, the call likely would not have been made. So if there was some separation between the two of them, because if one rider is doing it, it's really hard to demonstrate for us to really point to it and say like that's actually that's helping your teammates and not racing for yourself. I guess the most obvious place this will be called on our track is if you try to lead your teammate out for a sprint and then just completely hit the brakes. But again, it's really hard to prove.
Yeah. What about if the people who are, what about not wearing the same jerseys, but if 1 and 2 people who by 5 laps to go, 1 and 2 have figured out that they've got it sewn up unless 3 is gonna lap the field, and one gets whoever's in first gets whoever's in second to pull them all the way around to drag that person back. Is that collusion? Deals made on the field of battle?
Have those discussions out of earshot of the officials. It's really difficult. Like collusion doesn't have a hard and fast definition, which is a kind of a problem. And if we think you are sacrificing yourself for someone else's like benefit, then that's pretty much where we start calling it. So
as long as everybody's getting the best out of it that they can.
Right. If someone's going to drag another rider around and it benefits both riders, to both of their like strategy, like it's going to help them both in the victory of the race, that's just strategy to us. Yeah. And so helping, and then it also depends, and I see Carl Berg's comment, and this is the thing that keeps coming back about this national championship is if 2 people are doing something to support their teammate, depends on how that occurs, honestly. Is the teammate in this particular situation, the teammate was already off the front halfway around the track before they started doing anything. And so did someone benefit from it? Yes, but was he actively involved in it? We're saying no.
Interesting. Yeah. I've definitely myself made some bad calls on in terms of deciding to take deciding to take a sprint from 600 meters and not realizing that I was pulling the field around, or bridging with the entire field on my wheel. But
Yeah,
I'm sure you can tell the difference between bad strategy and
Right.
or dumb racer brain and
it's a lot
cheating.
easier, and I'll say it's a lot easier at our track when we see the same riders week in and week out. We know your riding style, we know what you do, we know what you're capable of, and so we have a much better idea. It gets a lot harder when you only see riders once or twice a year.
Yeah.
Andy and
Oh,
Zach,
yeah.
can I jump in a little bit?
Yeah, please.
So for beginning riders, because I see a lot of the novice riders on like Mondays and Cap 4s, the big things that we don't want to see is we don't want to see a lead out. As in, like, it's not a road lead out where it's like, oh, your team, like, it's okay if you're behind your teammate, but like, this is where the sprint is engaged rule comes into effect. As soon as that sprint is engaged, and we always say 1 lap for beginners, that you're stuck in the front. So you can't peel off. Like, it's not like a road sprint where it's like you have 2 and 3 riders in front of you and they're peeling off. Like, that is a no-go. So like, if you are going to try to lead your teammate out, like it happens, that second rider has to pass. And like that first rider can't tank, because then you're going to, like, that person's going to get boxed in. But yeah, that first, like, you have to pass your teammate. They can't pull off and give you the shorter lane, is how I kind of like generally tell people, like, because yes, it happens. Teamwork happens. But yeah, you do not see blatant lead outs. That will for sure get you relegated. And I've seen that before with some road teams that come out on Friday. They're like, sweet, and they give a giant lead out. And you're like, what are you doing? And they instantly get relegated, and they forget that, like, you can't do a standard road lead out. But that's the biggest red flag, I would say.
Yeah. And often we see that we're not going to call that as collusion. We're going to call that as dangerous riding or something, because the person who like essentially hits the brakes and sits up is going to cause chaos as they drop backwards through the field at half the speed of everyone else.
Yeah.
So we'll likely just call that dangerous riding.
And that goes right back to the point that Zach made at the very outset about what not to do, and that's ride in a dangerous fashion. And that's one of the other things that sometimes people have talked about, oh, is this collusion or not, where not in a sprint, you're not required to chase a teammate down. That's fine. But getting on the front and hitting the brakes is dangerous. And so you're not required to chase a teammate off, but don't just get on the front and sit there and block the way that is totally fine in a road race. Get off the front and get out of the way. Because
I was also going to bring that up too.
Yeah, making an accordion is good.
When you were saying that you could get in the way of a chase if there's somebody in a breakaway, that does not mean going to the front and parking it on the front, right? Like, that's dangerous for everyone, and people are gonna think you're a jerk. Like, nobody wants you to like, you're in the way, you're dangerous, it's unsafe. And I think that's something that's maybe a little bit different about the track. Is that people are hyper aware of that, especially in the higher categories. Like, you are going to not make any friends if you do that. You can be in the way by rotating through and taking short pulls, and that slows it down. That kind of messes up the flow of things, and so that's a good way to get in the way of the chase without just like slamming on your brakes.
That's a great point too. I should have been clear about what I meant by that. And yeah, when I say disrupting the chase, I mean when it's my turn, I will immediately pull off. And if I'm trying to really disrupt the chase, instead of going all the way to the back, I'll slot back in near the front again, and I'll do the same thing again, because it's demotivating for everyone behind you to know that I'm not doing any work. And so that's what I mean, but it's not doing it in a way that causes other people to have to put the brakes on.
By immediately pulling up, I just want to say this because I think this is one of the big times that we have crashes, when people immediately pull up following someone else, pedal through, like 2 pedal strokes, then pull up. That can save so much danger for everyone. It also makes it easier for you because you carry a little more momentum as you pull off the front. Because if you've ever been behind someone, they pull up, you try and follow them immediately up. You actually kind of have to slow down. That's part of what makes it dangerous. And then that makes it harder for you to get back in. So immediately is the right way to say that, but pedal through like 2 or 3 pedal strokes and then immediately get out of the way. And that's a good rule of thumb, whether you're off the front, off the back, in a pace line, anything that can save everyone from like stupid little crashes that turn into big deal accidents, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not just following the wheel.
And doing what Andy was doing from the official's perspective, it just looks like he's in the rotation, and it's really hard to find any perceptible speed difference when watching from that far away.
Great
It
point.
just looks like you're rotating through.
Yeah. So
Um,
Aaron had a question. Oh yeah. Yeah. Sorry, Jane, you were about to read that off, huh? Yeah. So tips for winning out of a smaller field. So of those strategies of how to win, so it depends on how diverse the smaller field is, because I've been in small fields that everyone was, because it was small, it was easy for everyone to look around and see any attempt at a break that was going to go. I've been in a field of 12 people and no one ever got away, because as soon as anyone started to go, 11 people said nope. And so there weren't enough folks that there was everyone knew that they were going to have to chase. And so no one let it go up the road and hoped that somebody else would do it for them. But in other ones, if you've got more of a difference, you can catch a small field. You can go and benefit from people looking at each other and not wanting to chase, and then there's no one left to chase. So I think it's a lot harder because you really have to know your competitors.
Yeah, I was gonna say I really like when men end up having a really small field for some reason, and then they're like, oh, this is why there ends up being more sitting around, because a lot of times women's fields are smaller and there's not enough of the kind of mid-pack people to keep the flow of the race going. And there's not as many like sneak attack options because you have nowhere to hide. You can see everyone, and our track is so big, it's not like you're gonna like surprise somebody out of the corner, right? And so it ends up being a lot harder race. And I didn't mean to be like, it depends in the chat, but it really does, because it depends what your strength is as well. It may be in your best interest to just attack over and over and over and over again. And that's going to split up that field because no one's going to be all the exact same speed, right? And then you might get into a smaller group and it's only 2 or 3 other people that you have to worry about. And so then even if you're not a sprinter, then you might have a better odds in the sprint, right? Or if you're a good sprinter, then unfortunately in those small fields, sometimes that means you have to sit around and maybe not be pushing the pace that much because you feel pretty confident in your sprints. I will always say the fastest way around the track is the sprinter's lane. So it drives me crazy when people ride slow up at the top of the track because you're going a farther distance. You might as well be in the sprinter's lane. It's easier to accelerate with a little bit more speed. You're less likely to be caught off guard by someone than if you're crawling around slow at the top of the track. Somebody has a better chance of out sprinting you. It really is harder in a smaller field. And so it depends on who's in the field with you. You have to pay attention even more, I think, than in a big field.
Yeah, for me, when I'm racing in a small field, based on just the way that I like to race, I turn it into a bunch of Kierans, which sounds kind of weird, but I'll just sit in the black line. Like this is if no one wants to do anything, I'll sit in the black line and I'll just slowly accelerate it until the sprint goes, and then I'll try and win the sprint. Like if no one wants to, I would rather do that than sit at the rail, because then if you're doing that, you're dictating what's happening instead of waiting for somebody else to decide what's going to happen. If you'll get tired eventually, but you kind of have that. It's one where you have to let the race go to your strengths. So the way to look at it as an opportunity is, if it's a small field, it's a chance for you to dictate how the race plays out. And so instead of waiting for it to happen in whatever way it might happen, try and take control. Say, I've been doing a lot of time trial training. I'm gonna just keep trying to break away and make other people respond to that. Or if you've been doing a lot of 30-30s, then try and talk to one of your other people and try and get a 2-up breakaway to go, something along those lines. And so try and take control of it instead of just waiting for it to happen, because that's a good way for somebody, a fast sprinter, to just win. Okay. So I did want to touch on, most of us, when we're doing points races, yeah, we want to be figuring out how we can score points and figuring out how to win. But honestly, most of us, when we're doing it, it's about figuring just how to survive, because they're long and they're hard and there's lots of accelerations and those suck. And so I want to just go over a couple things of that for me were really key to just especially when I was coming back to the track, were what I had to relearn how to do when I didn't have the fitness to be in the race, to still manage to stay in the race. And the biggest one is learning how to read the race and know when surges are going to come, because the more you have to accelerate really hard in a sharp fashion and also lose the wheel, the more you're going to get exhausted. And so knowing, and what that comes down to is knowing what lap it is. That's the number one thing, that unrelated to anything you do right now on Zwift in your training or getting in the gym or anything related to your fitness, knowing what lap it is will do more to your outcome of the race than any of that. Because if you know that you're going into 800 meters out from the points, so a lap away from the bell, start thinking about where you want to be and look around and think about what wheel you want to be on. When those surges come, you have a decision. Do you try to follow someone who might be a lot faster sprinter than you, who's going to get that sprint, especially at the beginning, the first couple sprints, God, fast people. And you can try and follow on, but if you know you're not going to get the points, you've got a decision of, do you try and hang on to that wheel, even if you're not going to be able to come around and get a point? Or do you dial back your effort? Because it's the time of year where we're all doing our interval training and that kind of thing. Well, some of us, I haven't quite got there yet, but I know what it feels like to go really hard for 15 seconds or to dial it down a little bit, and I can hang on longer if I avoid those spikes over threshold. And so you got a decision about what to do. And for me, it's almost always the right choice to go with the initial acceleration, but don't worry about a little bit of a gap opening up around turn 3 or turn 4. It's going to come back together until it doesn't. Sometimes somebody will actually counter, but most of the time you're going to be able to get back on. And killing yourself for 5th place is worthless. It's a recipe to keep getting 5th place. I think it's better to manage that effort and don't let a gap open, knowing that you can roll into it and continue that lower level of effort, and a half a lap later, past the line, you'll catch back on.
Something when you're chasing in a situation like that I see people do all the time is they start to get pretty close to the field and they're like, okay, I got there. I'm really tired. I made it to the field, and they swing up to meet the field. One, you're going a farther distance, the farther up the track you go. 2, you just put yourself at the very back of the field. So the next acceleration, the exact same thing is going to happen, right? If you're already kind of on your limit. So something that takes a little bit of confidence to do, but I think makes your life easier when you're chasing back up. If the group is kind of up high, go underneath them and put yourself at the front of the group. Wait until you're all the way within the group and past the group even before you swing up and chill for a second. You're in a better position if the next acceleration comes. You can be higher up on the track. you're not going from last place again, right? And so I think that that's something you see people do all the time. Like they've just chased so hard to catch back up. And I'm like, you're there, you're there. Oh, you're not there because they just started speeding up and you just swung up track and lost all your momentum, right? So that's something to think about in that situation. Like, again, it's about making your life easier, right? Especially if you're on the limit in a points race. And something that Andy touched on, and I think is important in the sprints too, is like, yes, you get more points for winning a sprint, right? It's 5 points to win a sprint. But if you win one sprint and you get no points the rest of the race because you exploded yourself, you're not going to do very well in the race. You're going to be better off getting like second and third place points in multiple sprints. You're much more likely to end up on the podium with that kind of mentality in the race because you're not going all in. It's not a scratch race, right? You have to keep going. And if you have like blown what you had in the first sprint, it's like game over for some people. I know that was something that I had to really change about my sprints in a points race because early on it feels awesome. You feel great, like, oh, I can win the sprint, no problem. And then you're like, oh, there's 45 laps to go. So I think that's just something to think about, that consistency throughout the whole race.
And for those of us who aren't sprinters, who don't have the ability to go all in, even when it's only one lap, unfortunately, I wish I could. I've always thought, so because I can't ever go all in, I can go what my brain thinks is all in, but I'm just weak. And so I don't actually go to 100%. And my math there is, if I can get the 5 points, I will go all in because I know that I can recover and I've worked on my training so that I can. I'll do it for 5. But I'll never go all in for 3 or 2 or 1. Yeah, because I would rather save it, because what gets you, for me, what gets me the edge over the next person is getting that 2-point bump over, especially if there's 1 or 2 other people that you're really bumping heads with. I want to get a bigger margin over them. And so I'll spend all my chips for that. Whereas if I can sit back and kind of drift and come in with 2 versus 3, I won't really go after it. For if 5 points is gone, I'm happy settling for 2. Let the other, make them work really hard to get the 3. But I think that's a good segue to what kind of training works well for points racing. And this is where I think, since you all may have heard, since there's lots of different strategies for how to win, the thing I like about points racing is, as long as you've got the base of fitness to get through the whole event, a lot of different power curve profiles can win a points race, because you don't have to go and win every single sprint that goes out there. It doesn't have to be the I can do 7 30-second all out sprints, and that's not the only way to train for it. So you can, but what you need to know is what can you do? This is where you have to be realistic with let your brain talk to your body about what sort of race you've set yourself up for success in. Generally, I do like to treat, I think the thing that most differentiates the points race focused training from other sorts of track events, I guess maybe Madison's the only other similar one, is just, it's the focus on repeatability. So you have to be able to sprint. I think it's fair saying, in any reasonable length points race, you have to be able to sprint at least a couple times real hard if you're going to win. Maybe on other tracks where you viably could just take 2 laps and pick up the points on the way, maybe that's a winning straight. On ours, you're going to have to sprint a number of times, and so you need the You need to be able to go pretty dang deep and then recover fast enough that you can do it again 2.5 minutes later. 2.5 minutes? Yeah, 2.5 minutes later. So if you break down the training for something like that, it's 30 really hard seconds and 2 minutes of floating.
I would say it's not 2 minutes of floating.
Maybe not floating.
Because
Okay. Yeah.
I think that's part of what makes points races hard for a lot of people, is that there isn't a ton of full recovery time. Even in Madison, you might have a little bit more time where you are like completely off the gas. I mean, in a Madison, you are trying, when you're on relief, you're trying to go as easy as you possibly can. And so that suits a rider who maybe is more sprinty, because they do get that kind of like full recovery, even though it is a shorter period of recovery, right? Versus in a points race, a majority of the time, it does not like chill out completely between sprints. I mean, when you're lucky, you're like, oh, sweet, easy ride here. But most of the time, the differences that happen in a points race happen after a sprint, right? Those are the breakaways that we talked about, the attacks that happen. And that's the people who can do that are recovering from the sprints. And if you're going to follow after them, you can't be like at 200 heart rate and expect to like be able to go with that. And so I think that's something to account for in your training. I kind of explain it as like, you have to recover at like harder than tempo. You have to get really good at like, you're going hard the whole time in a points race, mostly, right? Like you're never going super easy. And so figuring out how to recover as best as you can at a harder effort. So when you're doing efforts maybe on your own at the track, that means doing a sprint. So let's say like you do a 30-second effort on our track. I would say like get in the habit of doing like a 1-lap sprint, right? If you're out there training by yourself, you're gonna do a 1-lap sprint, and then you don't get to just like chill after that. That's when you need to keep going like tempo pace and get your body accustomed to clearing out that lactate afterwards, so that you are able to repeat those sprints later on. Because I think we're all guilty in training of going really hard in an effort and then just like soft pedaling, right? Like you finish your interval and you're like, oh, I'm done, like pressure off the pedals. Like that is the perfect time for someone to attack you in a points race, right? So in my head, when I'm training, I'm like, okay, I cannot let off. I'm dying right now, but I need to at least continue for like 10 more seconds. And then as you get better and better at that, then it's like, okay, I'm going to continue for a minute at like a good hard tempo, and then maybe chill a little bit, because that's like a little bit more realistic of what happens a lot of times in the points race, is that maybe it doesn't chill right after the sprint, but there's usually a point where you can be like, okay, I made it, like take a big deep breath and then be ready to go again for the next sprint at that point, right? Does that make sense? So I think it's about like recovering at that harder effort. Do I ever, so after an effort, like in training, Bernie, is that your question? So I do think it's a good habit to get into. Like I would never call myself a climber, but on climbs, I try and go a little bit over the top of a climb, because that is often in a race where something's going to happen. If you're in a road race, or that conditions your body and your mind to not just like shut it off when you're done. And so I think it's just a really good habit to get into, and that translates into doing better in those race settings, because you force yourself into those uncomfortable positions.
The mentality of attacking over the climb is the exact same mentality of the difference between people who, when they get to the end of their pull, I'm going to say in a team pursuit, but this applies in a breakaway or even in a smaller field that's just hauling ass. The people who think that their pull is done when they pull off versus the people who realize that their pull isn't done until they're back on. And there was a couple of good questions here that I want to scroll up to. Andrew asked, when you're training those efforts on the track, would you run race gear or mimic the speed or slightly undergeared to mimic the cadence?
I think it's going to be hard if you're out there on your own to mimic the speed of that type of effort. But you're not going to be able to do that on your own. If you were in a you know, a points race setting, you have all those other people helping you with the speed. So I'd usually be in a slightly smaller gear than I'd race a points race. So it's more the cadence. And then also for me, like that's my weak point. And so I am more like, I need to be able to stay on top of the gear. And so when I'm training by myself, I need to be in a gear that I can do that in. So typically smaller than I would race in if I'm doing an effort like that by myself. I don't know, Andy, if you want to chime in, but it kind of depends on the type of training you're doing too, because sometimes it is beneficial to be in a bigger gear. But I think that for that type that I was explaining, where you're like sprinting and then trying to keep going tempo, it's really hard to do that by your own power if you're by yourself.
I'm a bad example because I never train on the track because it's just too far away from me. But I agree that for this sort of thing, so I think with a lot of things on the track, form is so important and feeling the speed is so important. For points racing, and those sorts of training, those sorts of efforts, I think it's more about your engine. And so doing the power and doing the cadence versus at the sacrifice of not doing it at race speed, I think is where I would land. And then Stan asked about gearing. So in a long points race, for me, I do tend to gear down 1 or 2 teeth for the longer it gets, just knowing that my body is going to be fatiguing from more accelerations and that I want to be able to do those accelerations more quickly. That's something that I think is helpful to train on is, it is good to train on that race gear to feel what doing those accelerations on the gear you're going to be on feels like. So that's what I use the on track time for personally.
I often will ride a bigger gear in a points race because, as I've mentioned multiple times, I'm not a very good points racer. I am pretty strong, so it's easier for me to be in a bigger gear and not get to that like feeling that you get in a smaller gear. So the longer I can prolong that, the better I end up doing in a points race. So gearing is really dependent on you. It's dependent on the people in the field. It's dependent on what you think the dynamic of the race is going to be. If you think it's going to be a very much like lots of acceleration slowing down, then I probably wouldn't go as big of a gear because like Andy said, that takes a lot out of you. But if it's going to be like, you think it's going to be pretty fast the whole time, for me, a bigger gear is better because I can just sit and kind of chill at a lower RPM between sprints and recover better. But you have to have the leg strength to do that because that can blow up your legs and then you don't have anything left for the finish. So there's not like the perfect answer for that. I think if I were to say like a general ballpark, people typically will ride slightly smaller gear in a points race than a scratch race. Is that a fair kind of, in a scratch race, you're like banking on maybe one big sprint at the end or the sprint being faster at the end and wanting a little bit more gear versus in a points race, like what Andy was saying, there's going to be more accelerations, more sprints. You need to be able to recover. But it is really a personal decision at the end of the day, what works for you.
Zach had a good point, which is the timing in the night matters a lot too, right? That if that long points race is also coming last, you're going to be a little wiped out in general. But yeah, I think Tela, your point about you don't want to be under geared because if it is fast, then you've also given up your shot at those earlier sprints too. And I've made that error a number of times of assuming that it's going to just be surgy and then having it be on and having the first 3 sprints go as fast as the end of a scratch race, get no points in any of those, and then hoping that I could get top 5 out of the remaining sprints that were left because I just didn't bring the right gear to the event. So I don't know. I was gonna say you can race the race based on how you end up gearing it, but when we in our fields where we've got tons of strong people, everyone's going to try and dictate it the way they want it to go. And if there's more of them than there is of you, then you might lose out on that.
It is worth noting though that if you like accidentally put on the wrong gear or something within a certain range, once you kind of figure out if you're like in too easy of a gear or if you're in too hard of a gear, you can make small adjustments to how you're racing the race to make the most of what you have. Right. And the same could be said for like if you feel especially crappy on a given day, right? Like maybe you're not as snappy in your sprint as you normally are. That's when it takes some like recognizing what the problem is, whether it's the gear or your body, and then figuring out like how you can make the best of that situation. And I think that's something that people sometimes are like panic about and then do nothing. But if you give yourself a second, like, oh crap, I put on way too big of a gear, like, I don't know, like, what should I do? Okay, that probably means you have to start sprinting a little bit sooner. You can't let it go slow. So if the pace is slowing down, you need to bring it back down to the bottom of the track and keep it rolling a little bit. Or if you're in too small of gear, you don't want it to roll very fast. So maybe you're doing what we talked about and kind of getting in the way of that progress more. And so taking that time to make that decision and then like reevaluate your game plan, because that's going to happen no matter what it is, whether it's gearing or, you know, whatever, right?
Yeah, I think my only successful breakaway last season was because I screwed up and put on a 108 in a points race. And I was like, oh, I can't. No, my only option is this is my pursuit gear. I'm going to go do a pursuit. So yeah, if you only have one card to play, figure that out and then do whatever you can to play it. All right, so we had, it's 9 o'clock. We had some points race videos, but the reality is points race videos are really long, unlike Kieran videos. Kieran videos lend themselves very well to talking through. But I think rather than playing a points race and commentating over it, I think what we'd like to do is open it up to general Q&A and see if we can address any other questions that folks have, and then we'll go ahead and wrap things up.
I did have 2 quick points.
Oh yes, please.
The one that kind of tied together, but that I want to bring up that I realized are relevant. So you somewhere in there, Andy, you said like knowing the lap that you're on is important. So knowing where the leader is will help you know what the lap cards are doing as well. This is important. Lap cards flip on the leader. On our track, we generally drop the lap when they're coming into the home straight. So if the field is in the straight and the leader's going around 4 and we drop that lap card, that's for the leader. That's not for the field. So if it goes from like 19 to 18, that means the leader has 18. That means the field will have 18 when they come around, not right then. So just keep in mind the lap card drops for the leader. So it is possible if the leader's about to catch the field that you will be seeing a lap. A lap will go missing if you're watching every lap. That does happen. On that, sprinting when the lead catches the field, where are points allocated?
Yes.
This is one of those ones that always gets confusing. So we'll start with the basic scenario of 1 leader in the field. Very simple. Leader gets a bell, they're sprinting for points the next time they come through. The field should not get the bell. There should only be 1 bell. We should not be ringing the bell multiple times. So that works for indoor tracks when it's loud enough and everyone can hear it. That's not great for an outdoor 400 where you might not be able to hear it. But that's how it's cleaner. It's how we run it. So leader will go sprint for points next time around. If they get the bell and catch the field is now sprinting for points. So if the leader gets the bell and catches the field going into 2, it's pretty obvious. Everyone understands, yeah, we're sprinting for points. If the leader gets the bell and catches the field coming into 4, you're still sprinting for points. If they catch you on the finishing straight, like on the home straight, approaching the line, we'll probably not score that one because you're not really expecting that. And so it depends on, it's gonna be right there around that start finish line. as to whether we're scoring it or not. And that's often why you won't hear us call them up a lap until after the line, is it makes that cleaner for everyone involved.
So Zach, if I'm in the field, how do I know without craning my neck all the way around that that the field's about to get caught? Let's say I'm in turn 3 or turn 4. What do I do? How do I determine?
So there's a starter. So there are different roles amongst the officials, and the starter is the one that you will interact with most because of the one telling you and giving you the whistle and starting the races. They generally stand in the finishing straight or down in 4, and they should be pointing to the lead. Generally, when the lead is right near them, they don't often point to the lead when the field comes around. Sometimes they do on our track just because it's really, really big. But they should be pointing to the leader every single time the leader is near them. So if the field's coming through and you see them pointing just behind you, you know that the leader's about to catch within the next lap or so, hypothetically. Where this gets complicated is if there's a breakaway to how points are going to be allocated. So it's going to depend on whether the breakaway.
You mean two breakaways? So like,
well, breakaway in a chase group. Sorry, let me go road mentality. Break and chase. And depending on where that chase group is when that leader catches is going to depend on how points get allocated. So if the leader gets the bell and they catch before the chase group gets to the line, the chase group is getting points. If the chase group has passed the start finish line, when the leader catches, everyone's going around again because points are awarded the next time the leading rider hits the line. So if the leading rider gets the bell, catches the field, your chase group is now the leading rider. If they're already past the start finish line, we can't award points until they get to the finish line again. This gets very complicated sometimes.
so this is why it's really nice that at our track, we don't have people end up lapping the field that often, because my God.
This makes our track really nice. This makes 250s really messy.
Wow. Yeah, so that's the perfect time to segue to, if anybody wants to be an official, they're going to be.
Yeah, I'll make the pitch now. Yeah, aside, like those are nuanced situations, and you usually don't face them until you get experience. But as I said at the start, I mean, really, in the state of Washington, I think we have 10 people. In the greater WAMI region, I think we have 12 or 13, if that we go all the way out to Boise and all the way down to Portland. We have very, very few people. And the track typically takes, 3 to 4, sometimes 5 of us to staff. And we also have road races. So specifically on weekends like Tour de Bloom or Tour of Walla Walla, we don't have enough officials in the state of Washington to staff both races adequately. And it can produce an issue of really running races to the level of safety and professionalism that everyone's used to. So please, if you are considering it, I'll put my email in the chat. If you're interested in officiating, reach out. We definitely need people.
And it will make you a better racer because you will know from a different viewpoint what's going on. So even if you're just doing it selfishly to improve your own points racings.
And we want people across the board. Like if you're just looking to like work a handful of races at the track a couple of times in the summer, go for it. If you want to try and see how far you can go with it, I got sent to Columbia last year. It was pretty awesome. So we can help you go all the way across.
Yeah. All right. So any other questions?
I'm not seeing any other questions, but I had a quick question with someone mentioned that you can get points if you're like the second rider. So you didn't win the sprint, but you're second. How many points go deep when you're not like, you don't win the sprint necessarily in a points race, but like you're behind the winner? I don't know.
So it's 5 and then 3. And so that's why I was saying that I'll go really hard for 5 because you get 2 points over the next person. But then after that, it's 3, 2, 1. So you're only getting 1 point extra from over your competitors. And so it's from like the way I think about it, which may not be completely correct in all cases, but if I have a chance to sprint a certain amount hard for against one other person who I think is the main other person, then I would rather do that to get first versus both of us going just as hard, but there's one person up the track and they've already gotten the 5 points. I'll let the other person get 3 over 2 because I know that if the race is long enough, they'll tire out if they spend more energy. This is if we assume competitors of equal fitness and that sort of thing, if you're one of those people who's just way stronger than the strongest person there, then you don't have to worry about the strategy as much. But if you got people of equal fitness, then you need to choose when you burn your matches, essentially. And so you want to do it when it's going to get you more points. Yeah.
Yeah, and Billy is on the officiating side. Billy is making comments that yes, WSBA this year, because we actually had a pretty good funding over the last year of the pandemic. Anyone that officiates and works 3 races, WSBA will reimburse their license costs up to, I think it's up to 100. Yep, which will well cover any new official.
Right on. All right. Well, thank you all for taking time out of your Sunday evening to listen to us jaw on. I look forward to seeing all of you put these theories into practice really soon. Oh my God, like not even 2 months away. Crazy. And for a couple of people on the call, even a week out for the folks who are going up to Western. So good luck to anyone who's making the trip up to Burnaby for Western Track Challenge. And for the rest of you, I hope to see you all in person sometime soon. We got Amara, can you give us a rundown of what we got coming up for everybody who's on the call?
Oh my gosh, you're putting me on the spot. Well, we had
Let's see.
cleanup today.
Thank you everyone who came clean up.
Yeah, it looks fabulous. And then our next big thing is going to be our bike swap, which is on the 27th. Yep, in 2 weeks. And I just posted on the Facebook event, we have probably like 12, 15 bikes that we are getting rid of, as well as a bunch of wheels that have been donated. So we have a lot of stuff we're donating, and feel free to bring your own. Should be awesome. Hopefully the weather's nice.
Bring tents.
And then we have start classes in April, and then the end of April, the 29th is the auction. So make sure you sign up and buy your tickets for the auction. And then racing
Yes.
on the 6th. It's crazy.
6th of May, less
Yeah.
than 2 months.
Crazy.
Amazing. Thank you all.
Thank you.